Imagine the very thing you loved most in the world became the instrument of your death. Dingo Dinkelman discovered this horrifying truth when he encountered a snake he'd handled countless times before, but this time something went catastrophically wrong. What happened next would shock the wildlife community and reveal why even the world's most experienced snake handler couldn't escape nature's deadliest betrayal. September 2024. As the warm spring air settled over the lush landscape of South Africa's KwaZulu-Natal Midlands, a deadly encounter was about to unfold that would shock the wildlife conservation world. At Dingo's Farm and Reptile Park, renowned wildlife expert Graham Dingo Dinkelman was preparing for what seemed like a routine handling of one of Africa's deadliest serpents. Within minutes, this fearless conservationist would experience a catastrophic reaction to a lightning-fast strike that would send him into a desperate month-long battle for his life. A battle he would ultimately lose to the venomous bite of an eastern green mamba. The 44-year-old wildlife expert had built his reputation on fearlessly handling Africa's deadliest animals, particularly venomous snakes, earning him the nickname South Africa's Steve Irwin. His videos often showed him casually handling creatures that would send most people running in terror, a testament to his extraordinary skill and decades of experience. But on this day, even his vast expertise wouldn't be enough to save him from the lethal combination of potent venom and his own body's severe allergic response. That fateful day, Dinkelman was preparing for another wildlife demonstration at a sanctuary. The sun cast long shadows across the property as he moved confidently between enclosures. His family, wife Kirsty and their 3 children, Taylor, Maddie, and Rex, were nearby, accustomed to their father's daring interactions with dangerous creatures. For years, they'd watched him handle black mambas, puff adders, and crocodiles with a casual expertise that both terrified and mesmerized his growing audience of over 111,000 YouTube subscribers and 646,000 Instagram followers. Born in Pietermaritzburg, South Africa in 1980, Dinkelman had grown up exploring nature reserves during holidays with his father, who worked for the Natal Parks Board. As a child, he was fearless around animals, often bringing home injured birds and reptiles to nurse back to health, much to his mother's dismay. By age 12, he was already handling small snakes he found in the garden, developing the skills that would later define his career. His early education at local conservation-focused schools further cemented his passion for wildlife protection. This early exposure to wildlife had ignited a passion that would define his life's purpose. He often told his audience that his calling was to help people connect with animals, especially those who are afraid of snakes or getting dirty. His mission was to convert the unconverted to conservation, and he pursued this goal with relentless enthusiasm. The reptile park housed dozens of species, but among them was one particularly lethal resident, an eastern green mamba. The sleek, emerald-scaled serpent was one of Dinkelman's prize specimens, showcased in educational videos about Africa's most dangerous snakes. What many of his followers didn't know was that Dinkelman had developed an allergy to snake venom over the years of exposure, a ticking time bomb that would soon detonate with catastrophic consequences. But just how deadly is this seemingly beautiful yet deadly snake? The eastern green mamba isn't just another reptile, it's a silent killer whose venom strikes faster than most can react. The eastern green mamba is among Africa's most lethal serpents. Growing up to 2.5 meters in length, this arboreal hunter possesses neurotoxic venom that attacks the nervous system with devastating efficiency. Unlike its more aggressive cousin, the black mamba, the eastern green prefers to avoid confrontation, making it somewhat less notorious but equally deadly. Its bright green coloration provides perfect camouflage in the trees and bushes of eastern Africa's coastal regions, allowing it to strike unseen. When threatened, the mamba can deliver multiple rapid bites, injecting venom through hollow fangs that function like hypodermic needles. The venom contains potent neurotoxins that progressively paralyze the victim's respiratory system. Without antivenom, death from respiratory failure can occur within 30 minutes to a few hours. Even with medical intervention, the mortality rate remains high, especially for those with compromised immune systems or allergic reactions to the venom. As Dingo Dinkelman approached the eastern green mamba's enclosure that September day, he was following a routine he had performed hundreds of times before. With practiced movements, he opened the secure container housing the deadly serpent. Perhaps it was a momentary lapse in concentration, a slight miscalculation in the snake's position, or simply the unpredictable nature of wild animals. But in an instant, everything changed. The mamba, sensing a threat or opportunity, struck with lightning speed. Its fangs penetrated the flesh of Dinkelman's hand, delivering a potent dose of neurotoxic venom directly into his bloodstream. The initial bite might have felt like little more than a sharp pinprick, but Dinkelman immediately recognized the gravity of the situation. He had been bitten before and survived, but this time was different. The puncture wounds were deep, with the snake's 8mm fangs penetrating through several layers of tissue, directly accessing blood vessels that would rapidly transport the venom throughout his body. The twin puncture marks immediately began to swell and turn an angry red as the tissue-destroying components of the venom began their work. Within seconds, his body began to react violently to the venom. Unlike a typical envenomation that might take minutes or hours to manifest severe symptoms, Dinkelman's allergic reaction triggered an immediate anaphylactic response. His airways began to constrict as his immune system launched a catastrophic overreaction to the foreign proteins in the venom. His face began to swell visibly, with hives erupting across his skin as histamines flooded his system in a misguided attempt to combat the venom. Dinkelman managed to secure the snake and call for help, his voice already growing hoarse as his throat swelled. His family rushed to his side, finding him struggling to breathe, his face flushed and swelling rapidly. His pulse raced at over 160 beats per minute as his blood pressure plummeted to dangerous levels, the classic signs of anaphylactic shock. The venom's neurotoxins, meanwhile, began their systematic attack on his nervous system, compounding the already life-threatening allergic reaction. As his family called emergency services, Dinkelman's condition deteriorated rapidly. His breathing became increasingly labored as his bronchial tubes constricted. The oxygen supply to his brain diminished with each passing second. His extremities tingled and then grew numb as the venom's neurotoxins began blocking nerve signals to his muscles. His vision blurred, and he struggled to remain conscious. His lips and fingernails began turning blue, a telltale sign of oxygen deprivation that alarmed his family as they waited desperately for medical help to arrive. Emergency responders arrived at the remote location and immediately administered epinephrine to combat the anaphylaxis. But the dual assault of allergic reaction and neurotoxic venom had already caused significant damage. Dinkelman's respiratory system was failing. Paramedics intubated him on site, forcing oxygen into his lungs as they rushed him to the nearest hospital. His blood pressure had fallen so low that they struggled to find a vein for IV access, eventually resorting to an intraceous infusion directly into the bone marrow of his shin to deliver life-saving medications. By the time they reached the emergency room, Dinkelman was in critical condition. His organs were beginning to fail from oxygen deprivation. Medical staff administered antivenom, but the combination of the severe allergic reaction and the potent neurotoxins had created a perfect storm in his system. The venom had already begun destroying tissue around the bite site while simultaneously attacking his nervous system. Blood tests revealed alarming levels of toxicity and signs of organ failure. His blood was no longer clotting properly, and internal bleeding had begun in multiple organs, a devastating complication of the venom's hemotoxic properties. Doctors placed Dinkelman in a medically induced coma to reduce the strain on his body and protect his brain from further damage. Ventilators breathed for him as powerful medications fought to stabilize his condition. The medical team worked tirelessly, administering multiple doses of antivenom and medications to counter the allergic reaction. But the damage was extensive. Dialysis machines were brought in to support his failing kidneys, while specialized equipment monitored the pressure in his brain. which had begun to swell dangerously from the lack of oxygen. For 4 weeks, Dinkelman remained in the intensive care unit, his body fighting a battle on multiple fronts. The venom had caused significant neurological damage, affecting his brain's ability to regulate basic functions. His kidneys struggled to filter the toxins from his bloodstream. Despite the best efforts of medical professionals, his condition showed little improvement. The combination of severe envenomation and anaphylactic shock had simply overwhelmed his system. Specialists from across South Africa and even internationally were consulted, but all agreed that the prognosis was extremely poor given the extent of organ damage and the prolonged period without adequate oxygen to his brain. On Saturday, October 26, 2024, after a month-long battle, Graham Dingo Dinkelman's body finally surrendered. The wildlife conservationist who had dedicated his life to protecting and educating others about dangerous animals had fallen victim to one of the very creatures he had worked so hard to conserve and understand. The medical team had exhausted every treatment option available, but the damage to his vital organs was irreversible. His heart, which had beaten with such passion for wildlife conservation, finally stopped at 2:17 in the afternoon local time, with his wife Christy holding his hand as he slipped away. The official cause of death was listed as multiple organ failure resulting from anaphylactic shock and severe envenomation. Following the incident of Dingo Dinkelman's death, the wildlife conservation community mourned the loss of one of its most passionate advocates. His wife Christy shared the devastating news with his followers through a heartfelt statement on his Instagram account. She spoke of his boundless enthusiasm for wildlife, his special affection for African mammals like elephants, rhinos, and lions, and his beloved giraffe Elliot. But most importantly, she emphasized that behind all his conservation work was his profound love for his family. The South African Department of Wildlife and Environmental Affairs conducted a brief investigation into the incident, concluding that it was a tragic accident rather than any negligence or improper handling procedures. Safety protocols at Dingo's Farm and Reptile Park were reviewed and found to be in compliance with regulations. The facility remained open, now managed by Kirsty and the staff, continuing Dinkelman's legacy of wildlife education and conservation. Messages of condolence poured in from around the world, with fellow conservationists, celebrities, and ordinary fans expressing their shock and sadness. Many noted the eerie parallel between Dinkelman and his idol Steve Irwin, both passionate wildlife experts who died at age 44 while doing what they loved most. The Dinkelman family announced that they would continue his conservation work through their YouTube channel, The Dinkelmans, ensuring that his mission to connect people with wildlife would live on. The death of Dinkelman sent shockwaves through the wildlife conservation community worldwide. His YouTube channel, which had documented countless close encounters with deadly animals, now stood as a digital memorial to his passion and expertise. Viewers returned to his videos in droves, particularly his Black Mamba handling masterclass, which showcased his seemingly fearless approach to one of Africa's deadliest snakes. The irony that he had survived numerous encounters with black mambas only to fall victim to their green cousin was not lost on his followers. In the weeks following his death, wildlife experts around the globe used Dinkelman's story as a sobering reminder of the inherent risks in their profession. Even with years of experience in proper safety protocols, wild animals remain unpredictable. Several prominent conservationists posted tributes highlighting Dinkelman's contributions to wildlife education and his unique ability to make conservation accessible to mainstream audiences. The Dinkelman family received an outpouring of support from fans across the world. Many sent donations to help continue his conservation work, while others shared stories of how his videos had transformed their fears of reptiles into fascination and respect. Conservation organizations in South Africa announced plans for a memorial fund in his name, focused on protecting the very species that had taken his life, a fitting tribute to a man who understood that conservation meant protecting all creatures, even the most dangerous ones. At Dingo's Farm and Reptile Park, life slowly resumed its rhythm. The eastern green mamba that had delivered the fatal bite remained part of the collection, now handled with even greater caution by the trained staff. Kirsty Dinkelman, though devastated by the loss of her husband, found strength in continuing his mission. She began appearing in videos on the family's YouTube channel, often with their children, teaching viewers about wildlife conservation with the same enthusiasm that had defined her husband's approach. Perhaps the most poignant aspect of Dinkelman's death was how closely it mirrored that of his idol Steve Irwin. Both men died at age 44 while working with the animals they loved. Both left behind young families who chose to continue their conservation legacy, and both deaths, while tragic, occurred while doing what gave their lives purpose and meaning. The eastern green mamba that claimed Dinkelman's life represented everything he stood for in his conservation work: respect for dangerous animals, understanding their behavior, and protecting them despite the risks they pose. In his last video posted before the fatal encounter, Dinkelman had spoken about the importance of conserving all species, not just the charismatic or harmless ones. Medical experts later noted that Dingo Dinkelman's case highlighted the rare but serious risk of developing allergies to animal venoms through repeated exposure. His previous encounters with venomous snakes had sensitized his immune system, creating the conditions for the severe anaphylactic reaction that complicated his treatment. This information prompted several wildlife organizations to implement more rigorous medical screening for handlers who work regularly with venomous species. In December 2024, 2 months after his death, the Dinkelman family held a public memorial service at the reptile park. Hundreds of fans joined conservation leaders and fellow wildlife presenters to celebrate his life and legacy. The ceremony featured video tributes from international conservation figures and culminated in the dedication of a new breeding facility for endangered reptiles named in his honor. The Graham Dingo Dinkelman Reptile Conservation Center would focus on breeding programs for threatened species, continuing the work that had been his passion. As visitors now enter Dingo's Farm and Reptile Park, they're greeted by a life-size bronze statue of Dinkelman, depicted with his characteristic wide smile and a snake draped across his shoulders. The plaque beneath it bears his oft-repeated motto about helping people connect with animals to ensure those animals have a future. It stands as a permanent reminder of a life dedicated to bridging the gap between humans and the wild creatures with whom we share the planet. For the Dinkelman children, their father's death brought not only grief, but a profound sense of responsibility. Taylor, Maddie, and Rex had grown up surrounded by wildlife and had already begun appearing in their father's videos, showing early signs of inheriting his passion for conservation. Now, guided by their mother, they're gradually taking on more prominent roles in the family's conservation work, determined to carry forward the mission that defined their father's life. If this story left you wanting more, click on the next video appearing on your screen now.